Today, we're jumping right into one of the most intense prophecies in the entire New Testament, Matthew chapter 24. We're going to break down the specific, frankly terrifying signs that Jesus gave his disciples as a warning, signs that were pointing to a single catastrophic event, the complete destruction of Jerusalem.
So it all kicks off with this absolutely shocking statement. You have to imagine the scene. The disciples are showing Jesus this magnificent temple in Jerusalem. I mean, this was an architectural marvel, something King Herod spent 40 years building. And Jesus looks at it and basically says, yeah, this is all coming down. Now, one stone will be left on top of another. Just total annihilation. You can imagine that this prediction left them completely stunned. So a little later, when they're on the Mount of Olives, they pull him aside. They need to know. Tell us, when is this going to happen? And what is the sign we should be looking for? This is the core question that really drives this whole chapter.
Okay, let's get into the first set of signs Jesus lays out for them. This starts in verse 6 of Matthew 24, and this is where the warnings really begin to take shape. Now, you gotta understand, this wasn't some vague, far-off prediction. The first century was an incredibly violent time. You had the Roman Empire constantly expanding. You had these brutal power struggles happening back in Rome, and right there in Judea, the Jewish zealots were fighting the Romans. So this sign, wars and rumors of wars, wasn't theoretical. It was their daily reality. But here's the key phrase, the one they absolutely needed to hear, but the end is not yet. Jesus is telling them, look, don't panic when you see all this chaos. He's making it clear that this constant state of war is a definite sign, yes, but it's just the prelude. It's the atmosphere of unrest that's setting the stage for what's really coming. All right, let's move on to verse 7. You can see how the prophecy starts to build, adding more tangible disasters, things that would physically affect the land and the people themselves.
And again, this isn't happening in a vacuum. If you look at historical sources from that time, especially during the reigns of Roman emperors like Claudius and Nero, you'll find that these kinds of events were happening all over the place. It was an era of major upheaval.
What's really wild is how precisely historical accounts, like the ones referenced in the Benson commentary, actually match up with these predictions. I mean, we have records of a severe famine hitting Judea, widespread disease, which always follows famine, and huge earthquakes that rocked cities across the empire. Even the historian Josephus wrote about a terrible tempest in Judea. These weren't just feelings of doom, they were documented real-world events. The signs were becoming impossible to ignore. So on top of all those earthly disasters, things were about to get even weirder and a lot more dramatic. The first-century Jewish historian Flavius Josephus, and it's really important to remember he was not a Christian, he recorded a series of 7 unbelievable signs or portents that people saw in and around Jerusalem. I mean, just look at this list. This shows you the mind-blowing scale of what people were reporting. We are not talking about subtle hints here. We're talking about a meteor that looked like a sword hanging over the city for a whole year, a sacrificial animal giving birth inside the temple, and actual armies seen fighting in the clouds. Let's just zoom in on a couple of these. And get this, Josephus wasn't the only one who saw this. The famous Roman historian Tacitus also wrote about it. He described seeing armies in conflict and glittering armor up in the sky. This was such a major event that multiple credible historians of the time felt they had to write it down. This one might just be the most chilling sign of them all. During the Feast of Pentecost, priests who were inside the temple reported hearing a huge noise and then a voice, like a massive crowd of people, saying, "Let us remove hence," or basically, "Let's get out of here." The implication was just terrifying. It was understood as the divine presence of God itself announcing it was abandoning the temple. So, after all of that, wars, famines, earthquakes on the ground, and these unbelievable signs in the heavens, what did it all mean? What was the point of all these warnings? Well, the answer is in the very next verse, verse 8. And this one short sentence just puts everything into perspective. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Just think about that for a second. Everything we've just talked about, the constant wars, the famines, the supernatural signs in the sky, that wasn't the end. That was just the start. So, according to biblical commentaries, the original Greek word used here for sorrows is odinon, and that's a very specific word. It's the word used for the birth pains a woman feels during labor. It describes those first sharp contractions that tell you the main event is coming, but it's not the birth itself, not yet. So, if we bring it all together, as truly terrifying as all these signs were, they were just the birth pains. They were the unmistakable signal that something far bigger, far more devastating was on its way. The final, brutal delivery was the total destruction of Jerusalem and its temple by the Roman army in the year 70 AD.
And that kind of leaves us with this one final sobering thought. If a meteor shaped like a sword, phantom armies in the sky, and the voice of God literally leaving the building were only the beginning of the sorrows, what on earth must the end have been like? That's the chilling power of this prophecy.